Hello, Internet people. Welcome back for another entry into the series. This one is a little bit different and gets to the more fun side of things, right? Touching the software, touching the car, right? Um, I thought it was a good time too because I was having a conversation recently with another tuner. And this person was telling me they're tuning out in the field. They're working with a number of different folks, um, and the focus has been on pop and burble tunes, ghost cam tunes, a lot of some force induction stuff. But apparently, it's a lot of pop and burble. And he'll show some of his customers. He'll say, "Look, here's your tune. It's working the way you want. I'm just showing you here on these logs that, you know, it's not necessarily the most efficient use of your power platform." And they're looking at these logs like, what the hell is that? And there's low, I'll just say it, I'll call it what it is. There's low literacy and comprehension for logs and what they are and what they do and the results we're seeing. And this is really fundamental stuff. If you're going to be tuning, and I would argue that if and let's get back to the core audience of what this series is for. This series is for guys like me, gals like me, who live in their basements, work on their car. I don't live in my basement, but I spend a lot of time in my own basement workshop. And I'm tuning my car myself. I'm the kind of person who tinkers. I've hacked my Xbox back in the day. I was playing around with DirecTV signals and my Makobu 3 scanner. I've built radio antennas. I've done a lot of remote control stuff. Like, I'm an engineer's engineer, you know? And so, beyond the casual user, for sure, right? And this series is meant for other folks like me who love picking up a wrench. The idea of having their own oscilloscope is thrilling, right? Weird, nerdy, underground witchcraft stuff, with a little, and a lot of, gray market participation, right? And even some of the best mods out there in the modding community, they're the kinds of things you find at flea markets and in the community. So in that spirit, if you're one of these folks, if you're this stripe, you must understand logging, how important logging is, and how to do it, right? And each car is different, each set of software is different. I've worked on 3 different tuning suites now. Um, but so the theory is always the same, though. That's the other thing. If you know the theory, it's not a question of what do I click next. It's a question of how do I use this software to achieve this result, which is I know where I want to go, right? And then it becomes just moving through the maze, right, to get from A to B in the most efficient way possible. So, given all that, and sorry for the long-winded intro, but this is really important stuff. So, we're going to get into logging what it is. Let's start now. Enough yakety yak. Log your shit. This is simple. We're not going to go crazy here, and then we're going to use VCM Scanner. So let me just walk through a little more here. The most vital skill. I'm gonna get up on my soapbox here because there's a lot of ways to tune, and none of them are more right or wrong than the others. But the one that I advocate for, a thorough, formal, theory-based tune with data backup. The most vital skill of the tuner is not adjusting the fuel targets, the torque controls, advancing spark right to the bleeding edge of MBT, um, using a dyno and meticulous planning to wring out every last little square inch of power we possibly can. That is important. That is amazing. For certainly the race world, that is what you need to be able to do at a professional level, right? Nowhere near what I'm doing, right? Just good old fashioned hot rodding street tuning, right? For us, for the homebrew kind of guy, the most vital skill is logging. And the reason for that is this is where theory meets results. This is where things become real. It's also like the experimental bench, if you will. When the S650 came out and we didn't know a lot of the changes, I didn't know a lot of the changes Ford had made from this one generation to the next, you know, it wasn't until I was looking at logs of the car functioning in its full operational state, seeing how things moved around, seeing patterns, seeing trends, right? Um, you you have to be able to use the logging to see those trends. You have to see, causal effect if you touch a parameter somewhere out in the tables, and you should and must be able to see that crop up in the logs. If it's I've been a victim of this, right? Where if it's fuzzy, I'll tell the story. When I was working on virtual volumetric efficiency tables for LT engines, it is difficult at times when you're moving through a layer of abstraction, the VVE calculator, where you're making changes and adjusting shapes, and you then go over into the logs, and you'll see like a fuzzy sort of effect happen. It leaned out a little bit, or it got closer to, it got closer to calibration a little bit here, maybe not so much there. Um, if it's fuzzy, you're not getting the effect you're looking for, obviously. Um, Good logging should show results where if you change something in the model, if you change something in the tables, you can go right to the spot in the logs, the parameter you expect, and the effect you're looking for is there. Black and white, right? Anything less, you're just kind of screwing around, possibly making things worse. So logging is where, roundabout long-winded say of getting, getting to the point. If it's real, it'll show up in the logs. If it's not in the logs, what you did didn't work. If you're seeing something in the logs you didn't expect, believe the logs rather than your own preconceived notions. Right? This is the reality. This is the objective reality where if we're doing it right, it will show up here. And so gotta have it. And so how should we be doing it? All right, so for the first time in the series, let's go over to actual software. So if you've been using HP tuners and you have an MPVI3, you should have downloaded the software suite from HP Tuners. This is the one half of it, VCM Scanner. The other half is Editor. We're not looking at Editor today. But let's assume you have an S650 Mustang in your garage, you've got a laptop, you've got this software, and you've got the connection with the MPVI3 to the OBD2 in the car, and connecting to your USB in your computer. Just to blatantly make it obvious, this is the arrangement. If you're missing one of those pieces, if you don't have the MPVI3, if you don't have the laptop, right, your shop isn't set up yet. Okay, but if you have all those things and you run the software, this should be what you see or something like it for the first time. And if you're new to tuning, as I assume you are, let's walk through what all this is and how to get to logging and producing effective logs quickly and easily. So down the side, and I'll note I have a black background because I customized my colors. If you get good in the software, you'll find that one day, right? But if yours is white, don't worry. I don't have some different version or anything like that. But you should see a standard set of values here. Each and every one of these is a parameter or a condition of some sort that the software can record when you are taking a log. This is the static state. Nothing's happening right now. In fact, this isn't connected to my car at all. It's just this is what the software looks like. And this set of values will populate and become different when you connect it to your car for the first time and you use this button up here to connect to the vehicle. So the car is on, you're inside it, it's powered up. The engine's either actually running or you've turned it on accessory mode. You press this button to connect. Mine won't work right now because I'm not connected. And you will, for the first time, get a whole list of parameters over here it'll download as things it's able to look at. Once you've done that and handshaked with the car for the first time, you can come offline here and you can begin playing around with these different channels. And all of these channels are what's going to be recorded in real time by the vehicle when you are taking a log. And logging begins when you hit the record button here, or scanning. And when you do that, you will see all these values show up in this box here. And they will begin flickering back and forth in real time. And that is absolutely real data that's being received from the car. So the most important thing you would need to know and the process you would need to follow is if you come to some of these blank spaces, and I'm using a Windows PC, I assume you are as well. Right click, you can add a channel. And the channel selector will come up. And these are all the different things you can touch. There's two big differences here. These values under ECM, right, these ones, those are available on the vehicle. Those are things you can touch because they're just intrinsically there. These external inputs, this will apply to if you get something extra. So for example, the classic case for this is if you have a wideband oxygen sensor and you're having it come through the AM, the X series boost gauge, right? The classic is the, I think the 1339 or doesn't matter. This is how you would get that data into the mix here, right? You can monitor it. It's how you would connect it. The great thing about Fords is because they already come with two wideband oxygen sensors that are pre-CAT, you really don't need that, right? And there's other times where you would need to install an additional map sensor so you can do actual tuning against the internal manifold pressure for speed density. It's got that as well, right? So in the case of the S650s, the external inputs typically are not something you want to be touching. If you are clever enough to have an external input you are integrating in the mix, you're probably beyond this tutorial, right? So if you're new to this, though, no need. Don't worry about it. Just, chill on it. Otherwise, most of what you're going to be touching, probably 99%, is going to be in this engine area. And it's broken out across all the different sorts of things, right? And you'll start to see some of the chapters we have in the series match some of the, topics you're going to see here. One of the most important is going to be airflow. And within airflow, you're going to get a lot of these. You're going to be looking at mass airflow a lot. You're probably going to be looking at intake a lot for your intake air temp. You're probably going to be looking at manifold, right? You're probably not going to be looking at boost, because if you have boost pressure on your Mustang, you know what? I take that back. If you bought a car, if you bought an S650 Mustang and you're so baller that you came with a supercharger that's presumably some aftermarket company put on, right? If you didn't install your own supercharger, though, but you are now getting interested in tuning, by all means, maybe you are going to have to worry about boost pressure. I'm not there yet, but we will account for it in the series, right? But this is where you would get your boost pressure, one of many possible readings. And then some of the other things. We're probably not going to be touching. We might play with cylinder head temp. In fact, let's do that now. So taking a little tour, and I'm not exhaustively going through all of these, right? But let's say I really want to get my boost pressure, for example, and I want my cylinder head temp as parameters over here in this list. It is literally as simple as double clicking. And when you double click, you see I get this blue background. Blue background means that it is already in the tables. And so if I look at things like timing advance, for example, we see that that's already included. Knock retard, though, is one that is not included. So this is another case where I would come in and I could select knock retard. Let's do that now. And as I do that, you see it populate over on the left here. And now I've got all of these different values. Managing this and keeping this clean is something you're going to want to start to worry about. The sooner the better. Probably my first 5 or 10 logs I ever took, I didn't even know I could modify this back in my Mazda Speed days. But yes, you can and should be modifying this. You will probably in your travels find folks advocate for certain layout. In fact, I'll show you mine in a second. But you should be grooming your own layouts. And the key tools for that, it gives you a few. You can click on stuff and you can move it down, you can move it up. That helps you move things around, right? And you can reorder them. I find the hotkeys for this, which are control up, control down really help quite start moving things around en masse. It can be a little slow at times, but doing this right, you can move things around to your liking. And so let me load, and that's another key thing here, getting into doing this. You can save some of these configs. And you can see I have a whole bunch of different sets of configs that I've set up over time, right? And when you load them, let's see, I'm going to go to my speed density setup. Here comes all these different parameters. Now these are all from an S650. These are what I've been pulling when I want to do speed density tuning. I arrange them up here with my high level stuff, very simple stuff, RPM. I reference throughout all sorts of different areas. My oil pressure, my coolant temp, and one of my biggest ones, right, have I got knock going on? And, if you've seen the 4-stroke cycle video, knock is the enemy. It means we're moving towards detonation, and we don't want to grenade our engine. Down here, though, I start clumping things in terms of like their area, right? So my pressure area, my camshaft angle area, these are my map points. You'll see eventually this is how we know what map point the HDFX is selecting based on driving mode. I have all my air stuff. I have all my fueling stuff. I have throttle and torque stuff, right? And it's all in this area. And this is interesting because when you have it set up like that and when you connect to the car and you begin recording, you will see by area a lot of these different things going on. And so, for example, I keep all the map points together, as well as I can see what variable cam timing schedule I'm in. So fuel economy versus power, for example, and I can see the distance to optimal power, which shows me clues how the HDFX is moving through things. We'll get into all that later, right? But you want to be doing this, right? And when you start recording, you'll see it all happen in real time. Then you can hit stop, right? And from there, probably the key point I would give is you want to actually save your logs. So 2 points on this. Let's pretend I've saved something. So I'm going to go to one of my logs. Let's go to a speed density. Or actually, let's go to MAF. And we'll pick this out of the hat. There is a crunch time when you're opening a log. The bigger the log, the more crunch. I will pause for you. Okay, so another 10 seconds went by. This is what a populated log would look like, and you can see this is where I had a number of things populate. When you have stopped your log, though, and it's in this finished state, you want to come up here and you really do want to save your log. And you want to use a naming convention, and that's the second tip I will bury here, right? And I'm going to cover it again later, but that is, if you have a tune you're working on, you're going to be iterating through file names, right? Every time you make a change to your tune, and you should be making small, minute adjustments, every time you save it as a new tuning file. That way you can backtrack through the path you took in case you need to troubleshoot later. And that becomes extremely important when you want to use the HP Tuner's compare feature. Compare will save your ass if you have followed a structure where you're creating all these different files. And every time you take a log, so for example, I know there's a modmaf 1.1 tune, and this log is the result from using that particular tune. 1.2 is the 1.2 iteration, and so on down the line. Every single one of these has a tune file that matches to it, and that is how I can follow the bouncing ball as I make a lot of these continued modifications. And I'm looking at the log, go back, it's where theory meets results, okay? Gotta have these. So in addition to keeping them saved, so another thing. What if I didn't save it? What if something happens, life is crazy, my toddler came in the room and blew me up, right, whatever. It happens. If it does and you didn't save it, there is recent logs, and so you can find it there. And you will also find that there is a native folder. For me, I created a shortcut to this folder, and you'll have this too. If you go to your system, documents, HP tuners, VCM scanner, logs, it does in fact keep the native naming convention for every log you've ever taken. So this also can save your ass. Okay, very important you use that file management stuff. That is from an LT engine. We don't need that. Let's go back to what we were working on. One sec. Okay, so we got our log back. Couple of things. You will notice when you open older logs, they're going to bring up the layout you had from that particular session. That's how it works, right? And it should. This is how you had it set up. So it will vary from one to the other. That can come into play when, and let's talk about another big thing here. So back up for a sec. Each of these channels requires processing power from the computer to record them. And the chip on the CPU is much, much, much faster than the engine operations in real time. In one rotation of the crankshaft around, the CPU on the computer is going through probably like 10,000 cycles. So it has the bandwidth to watch a whole bunch of things in real time. Now that said, there are limitations. Every one of these channels requires processor cycles to, if I'm closed loop active, right? Every time a cycle moves, it's going to reach out to this particular value. It's going to verify its state, and then it's going to commit it to the log file. And the log file tracks all of these on a regular cycle. That cycle's much faster than the engine cycles. But if you have a lot of stuff, and if you have a computer that has an older processor, there is a wall you will hit where it has trouble keeping up with logging everything. Luckily on mine, I have not hit that wall. You may never hit that wall. You may hear this and then never think about it again, and that's great. If you do need to optimize, and this is best practice, it is good to keep a set of channels that is specific to the task. As you get better and better at this, you will have your math channels, your timing channels, your speed density channels, right? If you're looking at variable cam channels, whatever it is wise to pare them down a little bit. The other thing we can do is adjust the frequency. And see, there's a value here, polling interval. And that polling interval, if you decrease the interval, that means it's going to check that value more often. So like right here, you see I have 10 hertz, which hertz is once a second, I think. So 10 times a second. Yeah, that makes sense. 100 milliseconds is a tenth of a second. So every tenth of a second, or 10 times in 1 second, the CPU is going to reach out to the car, say, what's your value voltage for mass airflow sensor, get the answer, and write it to the log. So for this entire log, which is a duration of 25 minutes and 32 seconds, for the entire duration of the log, I know I have 10 times a second values for that mass airflow sensor. This channel and every other channel, right? And that kind of gives you a sense of how much data this is gathering and collecting for us. It is astonishing, the gifts we've been given from an engineering perspective, that the average home user has access to software and hardware that is this powerful. This is insane. Take advantage of it. Use the tool to the maximum possible ability you have, because it's just going to make you better at everything you do, and it's being just fed to you. Right? I'm appreciative, I guess. So other components here. So that's how all that works. You want to keep your values here. You know, it is possible to adjust these. My tip and my reason I showed you that is if there is something you're watching carefully, so like my mass airflow when I was trying to tune my MAF, you want to dial that up in the sense that you want to decrease the pulling interval to the maximum value possible. I think it's down to even 10 milliseconds. So 100 times a second, we're going to get this reading and commit it to the log. That takes a hell of a lot of CPU power. And that's where you may run into a wall at some point. And so a lot of the stuff you can leave it the way it is, bump up your polling sample, right? Pull more often with the things you want to track. And if you do run into trouble, you can optimize with the polling interval and with just decreasing the number of channels. I became worried when I was tracking these map points. You know, this is 27 channels that I'm adding here, 28 even, with map point 0 and the OP. But the machine seems to keep up with it just fine, right? And these become absolutely vital later. So that's probably another question. How do I know what I want to pull? That's what a lot of new folks always ask. What do I know I want to be tracking? I would say, and I'm going to open, let's see, first of all, we're going to close this log because I cannot modify or add channels while I have a log open. This is only flexible when I'm not committed to a log, and that's where I can change things. And sorry, lost audio there for a minute. Let's try this one. That's pretty good. If you want a laundry list, I would say start with these. You absolutely must have your RPM. It's cool to have speed. It's not vital. Oil pressure you're going to want. Your ECT you're going to want. 100% you should always be logging knock retard. You've got to have it. And you'll find out later that it's the engine will use knock retard if it senses the cylinder temp getting too high or detonation becoming likely. It'll reduce the timing to help give the engine a moment to cool off and prevent detonation. So these systems, incredibly smart, they're working to keep you from blowing up. And the logs will show you if you have knock retard of significant values. I would say 3 or higher. If it's 3 or higher and it's sustained and in like a spike that you see in the log, you've got problems, right? That's how you know. So you're gonna want to be recording that. Your intake pressure, baro, right? All this air stuff is good. Cylinder head temp, I like recording. That is the heads and their temperature. You can see how cool or hot they were. Your throttle stuff, you're going to want your pedal position and throttle. That's going to matter much, much later on when you're looking at torque control. Your desired load is critical because that is where the computer is asking for one thing and then it's getting another in terms of calculated engine load and the absolute load. Drive mode requested, you're going to want. Timing advance, you're going to want. Those that I just went through, I'd say are all must-haves. These are they came along for the ride. I wouldn't worry about them too much. And then this is all fueling stuff. You're going to want this stuff. Is my closed loop active or not? What EQ am I commanding? And let's show you something here. I can see more of what that value is, or I should be able to. Here I go. If I stretch this right, now I can see. I've got EQ for SAE, and I've got EQ for Bank 1 and Bank 2. So that's something important for the S650 world. Bank 1 refers to 4 of the 8 cylinders. Bank 2 refers to the other 4 of the 8 cylinders. Is this all 4 on the left of the engine and this is all 4 on the right? Absolutely not. Bank 1 is not cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4, just like Bank 2 is not 5, 6, 7, and 8. It's a different mix, but it is essentially 4 and 4. And so sometimes, for example, you want to record the EQ. But then you may want to blend the value and see if the average of these two is equivalent to that, just to verify things, right? This is the kind of fun stuff you can do in logging. But just be aware, you're going to see in a lot of the channels you're selecting, you may have to think about both banks. So it's good to, when you're setting up your log, get them both. Fuel system 1 and 2, MAF A and MAF B, right? Remember, on the S650, we have 2 intakes, 2 air boxes, dual throttle bodies, which means we have 2 MAF controllers, right, or MAF sensors. And so we need to record them both, and then the system does some blending of its own, and so you can see what that's doing. We're going to talk all about MAF later on, so I won't have to go into right now that this is voltage, and there's some fun stuff going on. These 4 are critical. I would say you should have these at all times. The STFT and LTFT for banks 1 and 2. The next lecture in the series, we're going to talk about what those are. Your fuel rail pressure, I'd say, is must have. And then these are optional. My wideband EQ. Well, maybe not optional. They're good to have, but they're not as vital as some of the other stuff. The wideband 1, and I don't know why this one says 5. But I do have these ones up here. I keep these as redundant. Cam angles, these will become vital later on for just getting started. Probably not super vital, but they are definitely good to have. These are all the torque items. I would say actual engine torque is vital. I would say torque source is vital. You're going to want to see that. I love seeing MBT advance. You're going to want to have that. As well as the commanded spark retarding and the throttle final. Of all of these, though, I would say torque source and the torque advance and the actual torque are super important. To get started, I would not, you don't need the map points. You don't need to go through. Later on, when we get to speed density following some MAF work, these will become important. But if you're just setting up a log for the first time, not that bad. Okay, so we beat this side to death. I'm not going to go into the histograms right now. That'll be a whole other thing, right? This is just, hey, how do I start? What do I need to start logging? What should I be recording? How do I add stuff? How do I remove stuff? It's like adding stuff. You right-click and delete. You'll see. And then how do I move stuff up and down and around? And then, what do I truly need to get started in S650? That was my goal today. And to impress upon you the importance of you should be doing it. Very briefly over here to the right, I will show you one other thing. And I'll pause while this loads. Okay. So, equally vital, your charts. These are very customizable. Probably the greatest mystery of this, I wish someone had explained to me as I look at this noise, is the zoom in and zoom out feature. And you will see here that there is this larger line along the bottom, and there's like a slidey thing here. There's like these 3 little lines. If I zoom in using this set of buttons up here, if I hit plus, you'll see that the bar shrank. And now I can slide this bar back and forth. And as I slide it back and forth, you will see this area move. And that there's also this line in the middle. If I click and drag, I can move that line. So this is super vital as well, because remember I said all these values are being recorded over here on the left. As I have peaks and valleys, so this red line that's going up and down is my RPM. And you can see I have it recorded here as well. If I slide this over, the left side to the right side is the overall trend it's capturing in this larger set of windows up here. And that becomes important because let's say I'm looking at watt poles. Down here, these peaks that come up are instances of high RPM. And you can see this one here in the middle as I slide this back and forth. This line is where I hit the accelerator. And how fast was I going? If I come over, I can see the max RPM was 5,143, which corresponds to this value up here, right? So this set of graphs and filters is giving you a view of your chosen parameters of these things over here, this larger list. And the zooming becomes important because if I want to start looking like when I hit power, what was happening? What was this state? What VCT mode was I in? What was my MAF? What was the, blah, 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 blah. As you're wondering, that becomes kind of a pain in the ass to move around in, which is why if you use the zoom, okay, now I have a much wider range I can drag this bar through, and I can watch in real time everything changing here, as well as those things I've selected here. How do I select these things here? I right click and I go to my charts layout. And in my charts layout, I can define, using all this stuff over here, and we'll talk in more detail about it later, but I can begin, understanding where this data is coming from. If I want to add something, I can add whole groups, which gives me a whole new set right here, and see what happened. I got a new swim lane on the bottom here. And within that group, I can start adding different series with the Add Series button. If I don't like MBT here, I can remove it with the Remove series. I can remove whole groups if I need to, right? And for any one of these series, I can select things I want to log by hitting this parameter. And you see this is a lot like the selector that was over here, right? This one, I will tell you, is kind of frustrating because there are times where it will tell you something is there. If I go to airflow, for example, mass airflow, and let's see, what was the thing that was driving me crazy? Oh, yeah, it was telling me, yeah, you can see mass airflow as a mass. But when I actually select this and put it in the log and I log it, the value shows as 0 here on the left. Oh, AD counts. That's the one. When you look at the MAF map, you will see that there's something, it's broken out as AD counts. We'll talk about what that means later. But if I actually add this to the mix here, now in that series, it has AD counts. And I would want to change the label to out caps lock on, or I could just totally, okay. All right, it's whatever. Bit of a snafu there. Yeah, I assure you it worked in the end. There, we did get 80 counts added. But if I was to log, it wouldn't show up. There would be no content there. So, okay, that should be enough to make you dangerous and start doing some logging. This is going to be very vital for those of you who do want to even work with a tuner. If you're not doing your own tuning, your tuner is only going to be as effective as the logs you provide to them. And some basic tips there: when you start to log, don't log when your car is cold. That's not the data we want to see. There are all kinds of things the car does differently when it's first warming up. A good log is when you take the car out, get up to operating temperature. For an S650, I'd say cylinder heads above 190 Fahrenheit, which is something you can set up in the car. There's a cute little set of dashboards that'll show you your cylinder temp. It'll show you your oil temp. I would say operating oil temp is 230 Fahrenheit, right, for an S650. So as long as you get those up, and you'll see as well your oil pressure when you first start will be something astronomical, like 90, 100 psi. When the car's at operating temperature, at idle, the oil pressure will be about 20 psi, and then under partial throttle it goes to like about mid-40s, right? So you want to hit that operating state before you start taking your log. So then the tuner's looking at the car and it's, full normal regular operation. And then from there, I would say for MAF stuff, it's just showing the MAF and how it works, right? Which is typically a watt pull, right? We'll get into that later. Speed density And I recommend you do speed density. And if you are working with a tuner, you're going to be creating a lot of these logs to fully configure the car and really true it up and take full advantage of all the power that's possible, which admittedly we're chasing single digit percentages probably on a stock car, right? But if you want that last bit, that 10% that Ford left on the table, you're going to need to true up fully on your fuel trims and get super accurate. That will require taking multiple sets of logs, even if you're just working a tuner who's doing it right. Even if you've got a tuner that's just putting on a peel and stick, and we know the ECU is going to take good care of you, you're going to definitely want to log and check that work and see what the engine is doing, right? And I would log before and after if I had my druthers, right? I would do the stock log and just see what the car's doing normally, and then any tuning work done by other people, take a look, see if anything actually changed. What did your money buy you? You know, you only know by doing logging. Right, so I know the barrier to entry is high in terms of getting an MPVI3 and the licenses to use it. It's about $500, right, between the hardware and the licenses. But with that $500, you are buying certainty, causal certainty, which frankly is priceless. So let's leave it there. Thanks for listening and watching. Hope you're having fun, and happy tuning.